acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, April 14th, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps and steps and steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Republicans lose their nonpartisan conservative judge. In the Wisconsin travesty of an election results, it's a big win, folks, big win. Meanwhile, Northeast and West Coast governors form coastal alliances as Trump declares he has all the power. And surprise, surprise, a tax change in phase 3 almost exclusively benefits people who make $1 million plus on an annualized basis. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders, in a live Zoom call, endorses Joe Biden, establishes a joint or a series of joint working committees. Democrats are eyeing, or at the very least pretending to eye, voting protections in phase 4 and a super, super expensive plan to keep people insured. New polls show 33% of voters have either lost jobs, lost hours, or been put on leave. And growing shutdowns may cause a meat shortage in the U.S., in addition to an extraordinary amount of food waste. DeSantis in Florida deems pro wrestling an essential service. And the South Dakota's governor's resistance to stay-at-home orders leads to an outbreak. Meanwhile, the ACLU files an order versus a federal prison in Louisiana where 6 people died of corona. All this and more on today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just do this. Did that work? I don't know if that did. How come I can't hear anything? That's not good. Well, hopefully that worked. Okay. I was trying to call into the call system, and I guess I did. I don't know why I didn't hear anything. That's a bad sign. Oh, I know why. There we go. It's just one of the 47 things that I've got to deal with in terms of audio that drive me crazy. But first off, that reminds me, I want to thank, I don't know what is going on with this program, but we may have either seriously undercounted the number of people who listen to this show, or we just have an astonishing per capita number of listeners who are sound engineers. Because yesterday, I think it was just in the fun half. I think, right, Matt? Wasn't it just like in the fun half? Just in the beginning of the fun half, I mentioned, and I'm having the problem right now. I don't know if you can hear it. Can you hear like a low grade hum, Matt? Okay, it's in like, I've got 2 different systems going on here, and I should make it clear that nobody associated with this show knows anything about any of this stuff. And it's literally just sort of like, I've got this wire and it fits into that thing, and I keep plugging it into different holes. And if one works, then I know that I've done it correctly. So I don't know the difference between unbalanced or balanced cords or shielded cords or any of that stuff. And so I've got this problem when I use the output of my second computer, which is how I call the call system and also record stuff. When I engage it, I get this hum that comes back on me. And I mentioned this yesterday, and I got literally 40 emails from sound engineers on how to fix it. I will say that so far, none of the solutions worked. I mean, I got it into a different electrical circuit, and that may have cut down on some of it, but I don't know what I'm going to do. It's going through a Mac Mini and I've got two different. I don't even know what do you call like an Onyx Blackjack? What is it? It's a USB recording interface. I've got two different versions. I've got one that has RCA plugs and then one that has 1/4-inch plugs, because the 1/4-inch plug versions, like the Onyx or that that Focusrite, they don't play with Skype for whatever reason. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. It's very complicated, and I don't like any of it. I'm done with all of it. but I want to thank everybody who responded. Much appreciated. Also, I want to tell you folks that this program relies on your support, and if you can become a member, please do so at jointhemajorityreport.com. For all those people who have emailed and asked for help with a membership, I will get there for you. Just a little more house cleaning. Bear with me, and then we'll get into this. We have the app is up and running. Many of you received a notice today that we were going live at noon. If you want to pick up the app at majorityapp.com, it's free, iOS and Android. You can set up notifications. We're only going to use it when we're going live, so we won't harass you with any of that stuff. So you just set your notifications. You know how to do that. I mean, it's not the first time you've got a notification on your app, and that's it. So deal with that. And I will get to plugs and notices at the end of this this show. Let's start with this, because there is a dynamic that is forming here that's been coming for a while, and the governors of, and we will get to the Bernie endorsing Biden, and we will talk more about the judge in Wisconsin in a moment. But this is when you're looking towards the future in terms of like what will be the next sort of weird, bizarre, I don't want to say post-apocalyptic, but there's this sort of like what would you call this, Matt? What's the word I'm looking for? It escapes me at the moment.
Dystopic?
Yes. We're in sort of like a dystopic, right? Like, I mean, like this sort of feels like a movie, right? Where, you see people walking around with masks, and, you don't want to, and we're going to move through these different phases, and the weird ones are going to come soon with like, oh, I got tested. I have the antibodies. I can go out. I'm going to wear my medallion that says I got the antibodies tests. And I'm only hanging out with people who have the medallion. So, like, things are going to get weird in that way.
Yeah. You thought verified on Twitter was something?
Honestly, this has the potential to be very sort of like, I don't know. Maybe it'll be helpful for things. Like, it'll create a new set of class, right? But the other development that I think is going to be similar to this, and who knows where this goes. So on Monday, two different things happened almost simultaneously, and I imagine they spoke to each other. Andrew Cuomo, Democratic governor of New York, got together with the governor of New Jersey and Connecticut and Pennsylvania and Delaware and Rhode Island and Massachusetts. And they basically are going to send emissaries, if you will, a public health and an economic advisor to a regional working group, right? The chief of staff of the governor of each state will also be part of that group. And they're going to begin to design a reopening plan for these states. and presumably some type of timeline and some type of like metrics. This is when we open, when rate of infection hits this, or rate of death hits this, or when we have this amount of capacity in our ICUs. These will all be the metrics I presume that they will use, and more. And maybe they'll also have like some floors. Like if unemployment hits this, or if economic activity hits this, then we're going to have to move forward with that. They're going to come up with some type of algorithm. Later in that day, California, Washington, and Oregon also announced that they were going to do more or less the same thing as these northeastern states were going to do. This came in the wake of Donald Trump claiming that he had the power to force all of these states to open up. So you've got these sort of like these coastal states that are forming their own little regional compacts, if you will. Other states, and all these states are blue states. I mean, the governor of Massachusetts is a Republican, but like a Massachusetts Republican. And you're going to have the red states. You guys got like Ron DeSantis down in Florida saying that the WWE is a essential service. That WWE is wrestling, world wrestling. And you're going to see sort of like some type of divergence. We're going to see, I'm not saying that we're going to have a secession or civil war type of situation, but I don't think that we're going to see anything that's sort of like polarized between the states and the federal government, probably since like the civil rights era, right? Except for in this instance, the president is on the side of the red states, as it were, and it has nothing to do with integration, but rather, coming out of these stay-at-home orders. So this is what is developing, and in part, it was a function of Donald Trump, I think, getting in front of people and saying, like, I have the power to do this. Here is a clip of Donald Trump at his presser yesterday. And let's start with Caitlin Collins first, because I think Ryan Lizza followed it up after that. And this is in the White House press room. And Trump claims that he has total authority to reopen the country. Let's see if that's true.
A quick question about something you just said. You said when someone is president of the United States, their authority is total. That is not true.
Okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to write up papers on this. It's not going to be necessary because the governors need us one way or the other, because ultimately it comes with the federal government. That being said, we're getting along very well with the governors, and I feel very certain that there won't be a problem. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Has any governor agreed that you have the authority to decide when their state...
I haven't asked anybody, because I don't. You know why? Because I don't have to. Go ahead, please.
But who told you the president has the total authority?
Enough. Please.
You mentioned the vice president.
Enough. All right, that was actually the second one. So let's go to Ryan Lizza. I mean, this is fascinating. There are examples of the federal governments forcing states to do stuff, but forcing it through leveraging things like back when I was 18, Ronald Reagan said, raise your drinking ages. And it wasn't specifically aimed at me. I don't think. Raise your drinking age to 21 or you're going to lose your federal highway funds. And every state did it. Connecticut was a little bit late. I know that because I went to college in Connecticut and got to drink for the first semester, a year or so that I was there. And Washington, D.C., because they didn't receive any federal funds, I believe, in terms of their highways. They were lagging behind, too, for quite some time. So there is a precedent for this type of thing but that's all statutory. I don't know what Donald Trump is talking about when he can leverage governors, but here is when he tells Ryan Lizza from, I think this guy's from the New Yorker, why Donald Trump has total authority to reopen the country.
Clarify your understanding of your authority vis-a-vis governors. Just to be very specific. For instance, if a governor issued a stay-at-home
When you
order,
say my authority, the president's authority, not mine, because it's not me. This is when somebody's the president of the United States, the authority is total. And that's the way it's got to be.
total. Your authority is total.
It's total. It's total.
Your authority
And the
is
governors
total.
know that.
So if
The governors know that. Now you have a couple of bands of excuse me. You have a couple.
Could you rescind that order?
You have a couple of bands of Democrat governors, but they will agree to it. They will agree to it. But the authority of the President of the United States having to do with the subject we're talking about is total.
Wow. And he was questioned that before and afterwards by Caitlin Collins. And he said, well, we're going to write up papers on it. I guess presumably that's the Office of Legal Counsel is going to try and come up with some story as to how Donald Trump is total authority over the governors in terms of their issuing a state of emergency in their own states and requiring people to stay at home, et cetera, et cetera. This is going to be fascinating to watch. And the interesting thing is that because the federal government has been such a disaster and failure in providing resources to the states, they don't have much leverage in holding things back. It's one of the problems with making your kid, the states independent in this respect. I know this with my own kids. Like I made the mistake of forcing them to learn how to feed themselves. And now I have no leverage with them. They can go and eat. I can't tell them to do stuff and threaten to withhold making food for them. So this is going to be interesting to see where this goes between the states and Donald Trump.
And John Yu's office.
More like Bill Barr's pet project right here, I would say.
Right. I mean,
it's what he's made for.
You was the guy from the Office of Legal Counsel who said that torture was okay. But Bill Barr, I mean, this is Bill Barr's sort of wet dream. How do I come up with, expand on the, unitary executive theory? Folks, often it's hard to find the time to sit down and read. Often there are things that you don't want to read. You don't want to invest too much time in something. You're interested, but you're not that interested. That's what the Blinkist means to me. For things that I'm like, I'm sort of interested in that, but I'm not going to dedicate like 3 hours to reading that book. I don't have the time for that. Blinkist is an incredible app that's going to be your new secret weapon for learning new things and getting ahead. Blinkist takes the best key takeaways, the need-to-know information from thousands of nonfiction books, condenses them down into just 15 minutes. You can listen to the 15 minutes or you can read the 15 minutes. For me now, this is the way I go to bed. Well, this is the way I pretend to go to bed. I try and go to bed, I read one, and then I stay up for another 5 hours because I can't sleep anymore. But you can read or listen to it on your phone, on your tablet, on your web browser. Blinkist is made for busy people who want to get the main points of a book quickly. It's made for people who don't want to expend a lot of time to read stuff where you just want the key takeaways. You don't need to read the prose. With all due respect, I'm going to just do a hypothetical book. How to be better in general. I don't want to read the prose about that. I don't want to, I just want to give me the key takeaways that I need to be better in general. So for me, I read about the 4-day work week. I've read about stuff like, socializing and stuff like that. I don't know how much better I've gotten at it, but there's been books too that I wasn't terribly excited to read, but I wanted to know the gist of it. So I could see, and right now I've got lined up in my queue, Ultra Learning. I don't know much about that book, But if there's a way that I can sort of get like, Matt Leckian powers to digest information, I will take it. With Blinkist, you get unlimited access to read or listen to a massive library of condensed nonfiction books, all for one low price. I'll tell you what else I'm thinking about. Rick Wilson wrote that Everything Trump Touches Dies book. Now, I wouldn't normally read a Never Trumper book, but I think he wrote that op-ed saying that, as a Republican, I'm responsible too. And for that, I'm curious as to what his top takeaways are. And if it's good, that's the whole point. If I have to invest in 15 minutes, I'll do it. And for a limited time, Blinkist has a special offer for just our audience. You go to Blinkist.com/majority report. You try it for free for 7 days. And then you save 25% off your new subscription. That's Blinkist, BLINKIST.com/majority report. Start your 7-day free trial. Save 25%. Sign up now at Blinkist.com/majority report. Also, this is great. This couldn't have come at a better time for me. So Literati is the subscription book club. It makes it super easy to find unique and interesting books for your kids. They deliver great stories straight to your doorstep. Honestly, like within a week and a half of this whole event, a box full of books for Saul showed up. Literati knows that home deliveries will be crucial in meeting your needs for uplifting educational materials in the coming weeks, and it turns out months now. Reading books together help create a time of adventure and bonding for your family and has real educational benefits. Kids who read books have better vocabularies and longer attention spans. I mean, look, the whole thing of schooling at home is just completely overwhelming. And particularly when you start it this way, it's not like we had any type of time to ramp up for something like this, or that the kids had any experience that this was all just so abrupt. So for me, the big thing is, couple days a week, do some math problems. Every day of the week, read. Get read to and read. And each Literati book has 5 beautiful books. They're based on a theme. They contain exclusive original art and a personalized note for your kid. Kids love to get notes. And here's the thing. You only keep your favorites. You send back the rest for free. That means you're only paying for the books that your kids love. And I'll be honest with you. Saul was like, I said, are there any of these you're not interested in? No, I want them all. And I was like, all right. If you're happy with the book right now, forget it. I mean, you got it. So we've been reading these books together. He's started to read them a little bit. Sometimes we switch off. One page I do, one page he does. It's great. Getting new books is super exciting for kids. And right now, it couldn't have come, honestly, at a better time. So for a limited time, you can go to literati.com/majority for 25% off your first 2 orders. This is the best offer available anywhere, I should say. To get it, you have to go to literati.com. That's literati.com/majority for 25% off your first 2 orders. That's literati.com/majority. And lastly, folks, I've been harping on this for a long time. I did another project with my kids where I said, okay, I want you guys to anticipate 3 things that you're going to want to do and that everybody's going to want to do when this is all over. And the big thing that I got Saul to concede was he has to go to an eye doctor appointment because he had some problems with the eyes, and he's going to have to go to the dentist because people are missing all their dentist appointments. And there's going to be a rush. Everybody's going to want to go to the dentist. And it was my way of basically making it how important it was to him to brush his teeth. Now, a lot of our daily routines have gone haywire. For me, the one thing that grounds me every day, the one thing that I always count on, feels like I'm home, is brushing my teeth with my quip. I know that sounds ridiculous. But for many of us, our daily routines have gone haywire. Quip is here to keep us on track by delivering the oral care essentials to you. You don't have to go out to get your toothbrush. You don't have to go out to get your toothpaste. Good health starts with good habits. Quip makes it easy for you to brush and floss better. The Quip electric toothbrush has time sonic vibrations with 30-second pulses to guide a dentist recommended 2-minute routine. There's even a size down version for kids. Guess who has one of those? Saul Cedar. Paired with Quip's anti-cavity toothpaste, an eco-friendly, reliable floss, refillable, I should say, floss dispenser. You get all the ingredients your teeth actually need. Quip brush head, toothpaste, floss refills. They're delivered on a dentist recommended schedule every 3 months for just $5 each. Shipping is free. You can join over 3 million happy customers using Quip starting at $25. This is the toothbrush that I got from my sister, and her dentist said, tell your brother thank you from me, her dentist. If you go to getquip.com/majority right now, you get your first refill free. That's your first refill free at getquip.com/majority. That's getquip.com/majority. Quip, the good habits company. All right, folks. Like I say, you become a member of this program. You get the free of commercials as well. But I am very thankful for our sponsors as things are starting to dry up a little bit. All right, let's get back into what took place in Wisconsin. This was huge. Now, sadly, if you'll remember last year, I think around this time, the left, as it were, lost an election. The judge elections in Wisconsin are nonpartisan, theoretically. And we lost an election there. The Supreme Court in Wisconsin, I think it's now 5-4, is it? Or maybe it is 5-3. The bottom line is that Democrats won't have, or I should say the left, but it's really, let's be honest, folks, won't have an opportunity to tilt this court again until 2023. But this is huge. With 90% of the returns counted, Daniel Kelly lost to Jill Karofsky. She had just lost last time around. She was leading Kelly by more than 100,000 votes. That's 7 percentage points. It could have come in close to 8 or 9 percentage points. This is when we had Milwaukee with, I don't even know how to do the math, 5%, 4% of its normal polling places open. Everybody knows the story. The governor tried to shut down the election. The state Supreme Court kept it open. The federal Supreme Court said you cannot count absentee ballots after last Tuesday, even though they were still given till today or yesterday to announce the results. The Republicans entered the election with a 5-2 majority on the state Supreme Court. So they now have a 4-3. This will leave the liberals in the minority until 2023. Next time a conservative justice will face voters. But there is an ongoing voter roll purge fight at the court. One of the people, Kelly, had recused himself, and the conservative Justice Brian Haggerty sided with the voting rights group to halt the purge. So it was deadlocked at 3-3. So now with Karofsky on the case, theoretically, Democrats should be able to stop this purge of 200,000 voters in Wisconsin. I remind you, Wisconsin was lost by the Democrat in 2016, Hillary Clinton, by something like 11,000 votes. So this is pretty big. And Bernie Sanders staying on the ballot in Wisconsin is basically the main reason that people are giving for this outcome. Because otherwise, there is no contested primary and people aren't coming out for that reason. I also think a huge motivating factor was a lot of voters were just like, this is obscene that the Republicans are forcing us to vote to basically steal this election, and they lost it. Very difficult to divine from these numbers what's going to happen in the fall, because we just don't know. There was no competitive primary on the Republican side. I've seen multiple different interpretations of this. It's not bad news, let's put it that way, but it's hard to know how good of a news it is. Meanwhile, let's turn our attention to phase 4. We're going to talk about Bernie endorsing Biden a little bit in the program, and then we'll talk more about it with Nomi when she comes on for the fun half. So phase 4 is being teed up, and the Democrats, I mean, Nancy Pelosi has still refused to figure out some way of voting remotely, which to me, a complete process question. But if the Democrats don't have an ability to vote remotely on a bill, then the House unlikely can pass something that is specific enough to compete with what's going on in the Senate. Maybe there is a way, I don't know. But to me, it signals that they're not going to take this fight all the way, which is a problem. But we'll see. HuffPost has a piece from yesterday saying Democrats are signal funding fight for expanded vote by mail elections. At the same time, Michael Grunwald, who is a staff writer for Politico magazine, not a particularly leftist type of guy, generally very empathetic, let's put it this way, with Democrats, was a bit of an Obama bot, at least in terms of, I think he would, if you just, I'm not talking in terms of intent, I'm talking in terms about output, in terms of like Obama and whatnot. Just to be fair, but he even has a problem with what the Democrats are doing here. And that is, they're basically just rolling over. They stopped the fast tracking of an additional $250 billion for the small business bailout, basically because they wanted more money for hospitals, states, and ordinary families. But here's the problem. Democrats are fighting for stuff that Trump already wants. Trump wants to shove as much money out the door as possible. And so they're going to give money to states. They're going to give money to families. I mean, they're still going to give much more to bigger businesses. But if you're going to use your leverage, you've got to basically say, we want to get stuff that you don't want. And that is stuff like voting protection in the fall. Why would you go for voting protection in the fall? It's because it's going to help you build a base of power going forward. The other thing you should be getting are automatic adjusters. What is it? What are they called? Stabilizers. Automatic economic stabilizers. Sometimes they called counter-cyclical stabilizers. Basically, it's this. We're giving everybody $1,200 now, or we're giving an extra $600 per week for 10 weeks for unemployment now. If unemployment stays above a certain level 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now, a whole new wave of money kicks in automatically. Why do you want this? Because if Joe Biden or the Democrat wins the presidency in the fall, and let's say the Republicans take the Senate, you don't want the Republicans to be able to stop a Democratic president and a Democratic House from providing support to people. Why would they do this? Because it's worked for them every time they've done it in the past. Democrats need to play hardball with this stuff. This is not an ideological issue. It may have ideological roots in terms of why they're so reluctant to do it. Part of that ideology is that they believe that government should be functioning for a reason. But there are times when you need to basically say, to call their bluff, because Donald Trump needs this more than you do. They now have a plan, House Democrats. This is a bill that's come from House Democrats. Apparently, Vox took a look at this, that they will provide laid off or furlough workers a way to stay on their health insurance plan at no extra cost to them, basically through increasing subsidies with the existing health insurance plan, COBRA. If you've ever been on COBRA, you know what it is. You get fired, and then there's this sort of like bridge insurance program for you. I don't even know what it stands for. Do you guys know what it stands for, COBRA? It is enormously expensive. After Air America went under, I went on COBRA, and I think it was like $2,000, maybe $1,800, $2,000 a month for bare bones coverage. That, you know, I had a kid. I was worried about that, and it was incredibly expensive. It was like 16 grand, 17 grand for 8 months.
It means
COBRA stands for Consolidated Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's great. On average, it's $7,200 for an individual and more than $2,000 for a family. Yeah, that's basically what 24 grand I think I was paying a year, annualized. The new bill is called the Worker Health Coverage Protection Act, and what it will do is basically subsidize COBRA so that your health insurance premium doesn't change. Now, this is an enormous amount of money that they're going to be spending on this. And what it shows you is that they can find the money that they would. And it also shows you that one of the problems we have in this country is that when we have a crisis like this, and granted, this doesn't happen that often, but who knows? We have no apparatus set up to provide health insurance to people. Brenda and I were talking about this before. The government could theoretically vote to expand Medicaid. Anybody who is, I don't know, at X amount of poverty, or anybody who has lost their job gets Medicaid. But the problem is expansion of Medicaid. I don't know this for sure, but based upon that Affordable Care Act case, where the Supreme Court said the federal government cannot force states to expand Medicaid, I don't know if there's a mechanism in which they can actually do this as it stands now. And, you know, COBRA, it's just like the federal government spending money and subsidizing basically private insurance. But it's far more expensive than it would be if we had a single payer health insurance program. So you can't institute that now. But if you're talking about the future and dealing with this stuff, you know, this is just revealed, and we're experiencing this across the board. We're experiencing it with all the support measures that we have for people. We have no infrastructure to take care of huge swaths of Americans in a crisis like this. That is why our economy is going to suffer much more than other economies across the world, because they had ready-made apparatus. They had all the buckets. They had all the tools that they needed to deal with this crisis. We have none of that. We're having to create these things from whole cloth. And it's a real problem. And it becomes much more obvious in a time of crisis. we'll talk a little bit more about this, but the Democrats are also saying that they want vote by mail elections. Let's hope so. But I want to, as we transition into the fun half, I want to just point out something. And maybe we'll put this up on the, well, let me do a couple more of these Trump videos. And then I'll circle back to this because Kyle Kalinske tweeted out something that I think is a good departure point to talk about this. I'm not going to get too deep into the, I refuse to vote for Biden thing, but I want to use, I want to at least make some comment on it because it, it's coming in the wake of Sanders and Biden, or Sanders endorsing Biden. But let's get back a little bit to Donald Trump, because we did see some reporters get a little bit more aggressive with Trump in there. Like I am of two minds. Obviously, I think the reporters in there should be doing this, but I don't know that it's sufficient at the end of the day. But this is pretty good. This is a pretty good reckoning. The idea of reporters asking such as from Trump is important. Here is Paula Reed. She is stipulating, okay, you close down travel from China in late January, early February, I think it was. I think it was late January. What did you do between then and like March? Like, what did you take? Like the time that supposedly bought you, even though we now know that the virus hit us from Europe. But what did that buy you in terms of time? And Trump at first, I don't think, got the question. And then when he did, he got really annoyed by it. And she was very, very persistent. Play this clip.
That time that you bought, the argument is that you bought yourself some time and you didn't use it to prepare hospitals, you didn't use it to ramp up testing. Right now, you're so
disgraceful. It's so disgraceful the way you said it. Let me just listen. I just went over it.
Or this ramp's supposed to make people
I just went over it
in an unprecedented crisis.
Nobody thought we should do it, and when I did it.
But what did you do with the time that you bought?
You know
the
what we did?
Month of February.
We did?
Was a gap.
What do you do?
Month of February.
What do you do when you have no case in the whole United States?
You had cases
when
in February.
Excuse me, you reported it. 0 cases, 0 deaths on January 17th.
February, the entire
January. I said in January.
Your video has a complete gap.
On January 30th.
What did your administration do in February with the time that your travel ban bought you?
A lot. And in fact, we'll give you a list. What we did, in fact, part of it was up there. We did a lot. Look. You know you're a fake. You know that. Your whole network, the way you cover it, is fake. And most of you, and not all of you, but the people are wise to you. That's why you have a lower approval rating than you've ever had before, times probably 3. And when you ask me that question, let me ask you this: Why did Biden apologize? Why did he write a letter of apology? No, that's very important. Why did the Democrats think that I acted too quickly? You know why? Because they really thought that I acted too quickly. We have done a great job. Now, I could have kept it open. And I could have done what some countries are doing. They're getting beat up pretty badly. I could have kept it open. I thought of keeping it open because nobody's ever heard of closing down a country, let alone the United States of America. But if I would have done that, we would have had hundreds of thousands of people that would right now be dead. We've done this right, and we really have done this right. The problem is the press doesn't cover it the way it should be. Go ahead. One more question.
That was pretty stunning, I thought, in terms of her pursuit of that question. But I mean, that really is the central question. He wants credit for shutting down travel from China. All well and good. Like I say, it ultimately came through Europe anyways. But what did he do after that? I mean, the whole story, remember they tried this for a couple of days. They said impeachment was the thing that that completely threw us off our game. Well, they shut it down, travel from China, in the wake of impeachment. After that, they did nothing beyond nothing. Their whole campaign to stop coronavirus was to try and convince it was just the flu. Apparently, the virus did not listen. They sent people out to talk about it. Trump talked about it at his rallies. It's just the flu. Sean Hannity went on and on. It's just the flu. That was their plan. It failed. It failed big time. Meanwhile, over the weekend, the story was that Donald Trump was going around asking people, what do you think about Anthony Fauci? Should we get rid of him? Is he sort of a jerk? He went on Jake Tapper's show on Sunday. And Tapper kept pressing him as to who was giving you pushback when you were saying in these meetings in late January and in February, we got to shut it down. We got to do this type of stuff. And you said you're getting pushback. Who'd you get pushback from? And he's like, well, I got pushback. I got pushback. And apparently it got reported. Donald Trump was aware of it. He was upset. He was getting like, somebody maybe went over to Fauci and said, please be nice to the president so that you don't get fired, so that we don't all die. It's one of those jobbies. And so Fauci gets up in the press room and delivers a speech. And it's interesting. Paul Reed asks him, are you doing this voluntarily or are you being forced to do it? Here's Fauci's response.
Time we should do it with the UK. And the answer was yes.
In this interview, you said there was pushback.
Yeah.
Where did that pushback come from?
No, it wasn't. And that was the wrong choice of words. You know what it was? When people discuss, not necessarily in front of the president, when people discuss, they say, well, this is going to have maybe a harmful effect on this or on that. So it was a poor choice of words. There wasn't anybody saying, no, you shouldn't do that.
Are you doing this voluntarily or did
no,
the president?
I'm doing it. Everything I do is voluntarily. Please, don't even imply that.
Okay. So, Mr. President.
And so there's Fauci. And honestly, I mean, this guy deserves a medal of diplomacy or something. I think I don't think he was forced at all to go up and say that. I think he realized that he needs to go up and say that to assuage that big fat baby's feelings next to him, because otherwise he's going to get fired. And, like we say every day, God knows who Donald Trump is going to put in that position. Someone who's basically going to come in and say, yeah, no, it's over. Everybody go out. Don't worry about it. And so Fauci is there realizing like, I've got to be more disciplined. I cannot go on these television shows and reveal anything about any of the reality that has gone on here because I endanger. I don't think he cares about his job. I think he feels like if I lose my job, I'm endangering the lives of thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of people. And that's true. I mean, can you imagine? Can you guys even imagine the pressure on that dude?
No, I can't.
Honestly, like that's what he must think. And he's probably right. If he loses his job, there are thousands of lives in the balance.
Well, that's why I mean, and on the one hand, we're congratulating that reporter for, her tough questioning of Trump, but she was also the same reporter that asked that question of Fauci. I think we should abstain from such questions.
No,
and think of the larger picture this time.
I think the press has to do that, but I think he answered it quite well, which was basically, please don't do that. Like, please don't even go there. Please don't even imply that. Because now I have to do even more of a tap dance for this fat, baby over here, this big fat baby. I do not envy that dude. I'm not in a perfect situation here. I don't think anybody is, but that guy, boy. All right, let's play one more clip and then we'll go to the fun half. This is the same dynamic. This is the same dynamic. Fauci is basically being held hostage. Here's the Florida Surgeon General. He's at a public meeting. Remember, Ron DeSantis would kept the beaches open for God knows how long. I am quite convinced that we're going to hear that like there are outbreaks all over the country as a function of all these kids partying for spring break. But DeSantis is going to be one of these guys who reopens like within weeks. Trump is going to say it. DeSantis is going to be one of the first guys who does it. And here is Florida Surgeon General in a meeting. He is talking about we're going to need to do social distancing until a vaccine is available. And they literally escort him out of the meeting mid-meeting. Check this out.
As we're going to have COVID in the environment, and this is a tough virus, we're going to have to practice these measures so that we are all protected.
Do you see obviously a vaccine could be the time frame we're looking at?
Yeah, based upon what has been reported, probably a year, if not longer, is what some individuals have talked about.
Are there any questions? Are there any questions for Secretary Mayhew? I know she's got to run, Secretary. Is there any questions for Secretary?
I got one of residents or staff in a long-term care facility after Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach. Then you've got Leon. Then you've got even smaller Clay County and Suwannee County. What do you
start to see cases in smaller facilities?
Oh, I guess I shouldn't have said social distancing. Time for me to go. Did you like that? How they said, does anybody have any questions for her over here? Meanwhile, we'll send our staffer over to basically tell the Surgeon General his time is up. That's the last time you'll see him in public. Honestly, it's like a rolling, Americanized version of the Chernobyl series.
It's nice to have Ron DeSantis's name on that in that frame of that picture too.
Right? Unbelievable. I mean, and on top of all this, Rick Scott, as governor, wanted to keep the unemployment numbers artificially low. So he added all of these obstacles that it took to get unemployment. I mean, that's the way these states do it. When they want to keep people off of unemployment insurance, they don't actually say like, oh, we're going to limit the number of people who are on it. What they do is they say, okay, here's how you get unemployment insurance. You call, but you need to call between the hours of 10:15 and 10:45 a.m. on Tuesdays. And you need to call, you need to let the phone ring twice and then hang up and then call again. And then we will answer your call. And then at that point, you need to send us all forms in triplicate, and you need to do this by fax. You can't do it by email. They just create all these administrative hurdles and require all these documents that make it very, very difficult. It's basically the same way they do this, like, with customer service for a corporation. Oh, you want to cancel your account? Oh, we'll get to that. You just have to call this number and then be on hold for an hour and a half and we'll cancel it for you. Florida is a crap show. All right. With that said, we're going to take a break, head into the fun half. Just a reminder, your support is what makes this show possible. If you have the financial means to become a member, please do so. Get the second half free. You get the first half commercial free. And you help other people who want memberships but don't have the means to do so at this time. Join themajorityreport.com. Also sign up for the AM Quickie. It's all available on the app, folks. And now we have push notifications. We can watch it live on video. We got video that we push out on there. Majorityapp.com. Just a heads up, tomorrow we're doing a really interesting interview. There'll be no fun half tomorrow. Just the first half of the program. Everybody's going to take a little bit of a break. This was supposed to be our vacation. What are you going to do? But hopefully we can smooth out some frayed edges, as it were. In the meantime, check out TMBS. That will be live tonight at youtube.com, The Michael Brooks Show, also patreon.com, TMBS. And Nomiki Konst is going to join me in the fun half. Check out her program, youtube.com, the Nomiki Konst on YouTube, and patreon.com, the Nomiki Show. And also check out the Intifada. Jamie's got some new episodes up, patreon.com, the Intifada. Matt.
Yeah, triumphant first literary hangover stream last night. I played Doom Eternal for about an hour and a half.
What does that got to do with literary anything?
Well, I talked very briefly about Foucault and how he talks about the Plague Town and Discipline and Punish. So I did crowbar a little bit of that in there, but the rest of it was, shotgun rounds and demons and things like that. But I was actually playing on a pretty high difficulty level and did okay. I stick my tongue out a lot. It turns out when
I do that too.
Yeah,
I do that too when I'm concentrating. That's like Michael Jordan does.
Exactly. That's how I look at it too. So yeah, patreon.com/literary hangover, folks. I'll probably Twitch stream tomorrow afternoon. So.
Are people going to file complaints with Twitch since they're not getting enough of literary? You gotta be careful with that.
Oh, I don't think so. I think there'll be plenty of literary stuff. I'm going to play a game called A Plague Tale, while Alex and Grace discuss Daniel Defoe's Plague Journal from Plague Journal, I think it's called, from the 1600s. So we are going to get literary on it, but for other times I'll just be playing NBA 2K and BSing with the people in the chat. So it's fun. Patreon.com/literary hangover if you want the links to those.
Unbelievable. All right, quick break. When we come back, Nomiki Konst will be with us. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous. You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Ooh. Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're not paying.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
but Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up.
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
All right, we are back. Sam Cedar on the Majority Report. It's the fun half, ladies and gentlemen, and joining me. Gosh darn it, I don't have my I just don't have my fanfare. So how about this? We'll just do this. Wait, why doesn't that make any noise?
Would you like me to make a noise for you?
What just happened? How come I'm not why isn't that making any noise? Are you hearing anything?
No, we're not hearing anything.
No.
Here, I'll do the sound again.
Oh, that's even better.
Really annoying.
Please record that. Make that my ringtone, please.
I don't understand. What changed? Nothing changed.
I feel like that's the lesson in doing these setups. You do nothing and things change.
All right. I almost want to take a phone call to find out if I can hear anybody, but I guess we'll do that in a bit. So Nomi, let's get to this. Yesterday, and you had and I would encourage people to go watch this, because you know, one of the things that I appreciate about your experience is that your critique of the failures of the Democratic Party are not, I mean, like, I get really annoyed at the idea of like the Democratic Party, right? Like, just like, there is no the Democratic Party.
Right.
There are various constituencies. There are various groups of people, some of whom are at the leadership, but their leadership is really, they're just like at the administrative leadership level. Mm-hmm. They're the people who are supposed to be the technocrats, but the problem is that they have misaligned incentives with what the rest of the party membership, if you will, want. Theirs is like, wait a second, this is a job for me and I want to make as much cash as I possibly can. And, you know, I mean, it would be the equivalent of like saying like, I've done very well with Donald Trump as president. So I'm actually going to call for Donald Trump to be president because it's going to help me. You know, that's basically, actually, that was sort of the argument we're making. It's not even a metaphor, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
The analogy. And I don't know how conscious they are of it, but I do think that there is like, I don't know that anybody says like, we're going to tank it because, but I think that people pursue, not all people, maybe not even the majority of people, but people will pursue money. They will pursue positive feedback in pursuit, you know, and then reorient their perspective as to what works based upon that. Mm-hmm. And conflate and not be able to step back because, you know, like it's an old saying. It's very hard to convince, what is that saying? It's very hard to convince someone,
to go against their paycheck.
Yeah. Or something. Yeah,
challenging someone to go against the idea of their paycheck. I hear that line a lot from people. They're like, you know, give it up, Nomi. You're not going to convince, you know, Jen O'Malley Dillon that like Bernie Sanders is the way to go, even if she is more populist. Her paycheck is, you know, she's the campaign for Joe Biden.
Right. Yeah. Right. And I think that's a sincere thing. Like, you know, I think people get captured by positive feedback and it reorients what their perspective is. And so I would encourage, I don't know what the title of that, I can't remember what was that? Do you remember what it was?
It's on if you go to my YouTube for the Nomiki show, it's like, it should be one of the top ones. Let me find it real quick. I think it's something like, do the Democrats really want to win?
Right. And I really appreciated that. So I wanted to tell you that up front.
Thank you.
And it, so let's look at this from a very practical standpoint. Yesterday, Bernie Sanders endorsed Joe Biden. Here is a clip of Bernie Sanders doing that very thing on a on a Zoom call, not unlike ours.
Right.
Here it is.
Just as many viewers.
Maybe.
I am asking all Americans, I'm asking every Democrat, I'm asking every independent, I'm asking a lot of Republicans to come together in this campaign to support your candidacy, which I endorse, to make certain that we defeat somebody who I believe, and I'm speaking just for myself now, is the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country. A president, and you made this point, who downplayed this pandemic, who ignored the advice that some of his people were giving him, who has not used the Defense Production Act early on so that we could produce the masks, the gowns, the gloves, the ventilators that our medical personnel desperately need, who today, because I understand that is threatening to fire Dr. Fauci, who has been unbelievable. I mean, who has been day after day the voice of science to the American people, trying to explain how we go forward in this crisis, and he's threatening to fire him. So to me, for all of those reasons and so many more, a president who apparently has never read the Constitution of the United States, who believes he's above the law, a president who lies all of the time, a president who has at least shown me that he is a racist and a sexist and a homophobe and a xenophobe and a religious bigot. I mean, for all of those reasons or more, we've got to make Trump a one-term president, and we need you in the White House. So I will do all that I can to see that happens, Joe. And I know that there is an enormous responsibility on your shoulders right now. And it's imperative that all of us work together to do what has to be done, not only in this moment, but beyond this moment, in the future of this country.
So there's the endorsement, replete with Joe Biden pretending like he was surprised. Like as soon as he said, like, I endorse it, what? Oh, geez.
I mean, to be fair, he might have actually been surprised. He may have forgotten what was going on.
What are we doing again here? Right, I cannot remember.
I need those cue cards.
I mean, there it is. I think I don't know. What's your reaction to that?
You know, I think my initial reaction was, despite the Zoom and Biden's teleprompter, it was much more comfortable than the weird endorsement situation with Hillary Clinton. Granted, the primary, I know a lot of people think that this election was much worse than last time. I mean, it was disappointing, more disappointing than last time, but I don't think it was actually worse. I mean, it was very toxic between the Clinton people, and they were vengeful, and they did a lot of nasty things that carried on. You know, at least Joe Biden does it behind the scenes. They did it aggressively to your face. And that endorsement with Hillary Clinton on stage with Bernie was, do you remember that? She's wearing the pink jacket. And they were at a rally, and they barely spoke to each other, barely looked at each other. It was just an awkward endorsement. And of course, you know, he never got credit for running around the country and doing dozens of events for her. So,
yeah, I mean, I thought the whole thing overall was, you know, from a performative standpoint was a little bit. I mean, I think they genuinely. I mean, I think I think they both. I think Biden was, you know, genuinely appreciative, and I think they clearly, you know, like each other personally. And Sanders, you know, you can see, if you watch the whole thing, you can step back and you can see how the negotiation went. Bernie needs the opportunity to say these things.
Mm-hmm.
He will say them in such a way that he is speaking for himself. He will indicate that, you know, you have your set of politics and I have mine, and I respect that. I mean, you know, one of the things that when I got rehired by MSNBC, really the only thing I asked for was that my statement be included with their statement. And because I knew their statement would be the one that would travel. And so I got to define what happened as they did simultaneously. And that's what this felt like. And I think that, like, what is indicative now, I don't want people to, you know, get, you know, a little, you know, hypersensitive about this. It is clear at the very least that the Biden campaign understands they must, at the very least, project that they are listening and engaging and showing respect to Sanders and to his supporters. They are really doing that in a way that did not happen last time around, and didn't, really particularly happen with any other candidate. I mean, obviously for obvious reasons, there was no other candidate who had that kind of support, but they're not being, let's put it this way, maybe who knows how the road to get here was, but they're not being a-holes about it. They're not being arrogant. They're not projecting an arrogance.
The actual campaign. We have to be very clear, because I'm sure people are going to come at us online and say, I don't know, I've been seeing Biden people online all day.
Well, of course.
And that's true. I mean, but I think that comes down to Jen O'Malley Dillon, who is the campaign manager, who took on the role the day of the pandemic and everything went virtual. Granted, they've made a lot of mistakes. I'm not saying that it was the most effective campaign and that they had tech set up and, who knows what they were dealing with. But I will say that she is not a malicious person. She was our Unity Reform Commission chair, and I expected a completely different experience with her specifically going in. And I left feeling like she was somebody who sided with us a lot on a lot of reforms, if you can believe it or not, a lot of reforms like caucuses and opening up the primary. And I think, that's a little bit reassuring having at the top of the campaign. I mean, they could have gone with quite a few people, as we know. And if anybody read Shattered, that book by Jonathan Allen and Amy Parnas about Hillary Clinton's campaign, she was part of this like turf war in the campaign and sort of shut out by the Clintons. So it's also sort of an indicator of the factions that still exist. We forget that Clinton and Obama ran a primary against each other, in which many of the Obama people did not talk to the Clinton people maybe for 8 years.
Right.
And then they all had to join together and support Clinton. Now they all hate us. Let's be very clear. Right. They despise us, but they don't have,
there's fissures there. There's fissures there.
There are definitely fissures.
And there was not a quality of like, you must bend the knee type of situation. Right. It was, and that I found, it's a start. Like what there is there's an opportunity. It's interesting. I read an interview with AOC. I think it was in the Times, where she was saying that, look, what needs to happen is there needs to be the projection. Like, obviously these people are never going to support the programmatic things that we want to support, but there needs to be enough there that projects hope. And I think that's what is being, created. I don't know, I can't say that it's from afar, who knows what the percentages are. But this I found encouraging. Again, please don't I don't want people to be like,
sell out Sam.
Well, I don't care, actually.
You're covering the news. You're covering it. Well,
but I mean, I'm making assessments here. They could have been dicks about it.
Yeah.
It could have been
bigger dicks. I mean, there are people who are definitely dicks. We have to make, again, like back to the DNC argument, inside circle.
I'm talking about what they presented through Biden in this moment. Brendan, let's play that clip of Biden basically, and coronavirus has given an opportunity. This whole pause has given everybody an opportunity to just hit the reset button, and has given everybody sort of like an out for things. It gave Biden an out from having to campaign, which I think was crucial, honestly. This would have been this still, I know it looked like it was over, but without coronavirus, who knows what would have happened. But now you have a situation where he's not going to leave the house, and nobody's going to be like, why isn't Joe Biden going out and campaigning? Well, he can't. Play this clip of Joe Biden. Remember, he's been selling for a long time. We're just going to return to normalcy. But here he is talking to Bernie.
Instincts of this administration. We all know more than 16 million Americans have lost their jobs already. Our federal government has to act more decisively to get assistance the Congress has already approved of more than $2.2 trillion into the hands of those who need it the most: workers, families, small businesses. Now, this leads me to a critical point. When this crisis has receded, We can't just think about building back to the way things were before. We need to build better for the future. Many of the biggest cracks in our social safety net have been laid bare by this crisis. From health care to paid sick leave to the shortcomings of our unemployment system. And we need to build a 21st century safety net that takes care of all of our citizens in times of crisis. And I mean all of our citizens. Yes, in all times, not just in crisis. We're going to need to address rebuilding our nation's infrastructure. We're going to need to shore up our democracy.
Right, we can stop. Oh, bless his heart. Bless his heart. I mean, again, the performative aspects of this, it was very strange watching Bernie sort of like just talk extemporaneously. Of course, it's, the same stuff he's been always saying, but, he's been on the campaign trail. He's been talking about this stuff for years. And then watching Biden sort of, and he's a very good teleprompter reader for the most part, but it still comes across. He's a little stiff. But the point is that they were able to use this moment, able to recognize, use whatever verb you want to, put in here. There was a change. He has renounced his earlier position of we are going back to the way it was. And basically saying we need to have a mild evolution or something. He's changed his rhetoric. That has been the staple of his presidential campaign.
Well, it's because the vote that he was looking for in the primary was, he was banking on the over 60 vote, in particular the African American vote, who, whether they connected the dots between a broken America or grew up in an era where America was in a different place than it was under Obama, no matter where we want to go. They saw the normalcy of the Obama campaign as possibly the best years they've had in South Carolina in particular. I'm not, generalizing here because obviously there's many different demographics, but he was focusing very much on an older African-American vote that required a different message than the general election, which is a bunch of disenchanted voters that didn't feel seen, heard, whatever it is during the Obama years. Didn't feel like their most crucial needs were being taken care of during the Obama years, whether you're a millennial or whether you're, a pork plant worker in South Dakota. I think it's different messaging. Yeah.
Well, I read it a little bit differently. Like, I feel like prior to this, he was saying like, I am the no drama candidate and I represent no risk. And so I am the easy candidate to choose because I have no risk. And therefore I'm going to be palatable to more people. And I'm going to take no risks with this. And that's why, I'm going to say I'm going to veto or however he backed off it or whatever. I'm not going to sign, Medicare for all because I'm not going to upset the apple cart. And now this has given him an opportunity to say, I am going to upset the apple cart, but in fact, we have no option. On some level, frankly,
we don't. That's where we are.
This is that night that we covered that debate. That's what I wanted Bernie to say.
Right.
That coronavirus has now, we have no option to return to the past because this is changing everything.
Mm-hmm.
And Bernie did not take that opportunity to say that then. And now Biden is basically saying, it's a subtle shift rhetorically. It came in the midst of everything else, but he basically just changed the course of his campaign from a rhetorical standpoint. I don't want people to get that, but what that does is it shifts the terrain in which he sits on. He's now on a different playing field.
Right.
And he doesn't necessarily have the ideas, but he is on the playing field where he's open to ideas. And I don't want to overstate this, but before he was like, we're returning to the past.
Yeah.
And now he's saying we're going to the future. The future doesn't necessarily look like the future that you and I want or that Bernie wants, but it's in that realm. And so there's more latitude to push him on certain things. That's at least what he's trying to communicate. Whether that's true or not, I think we'll
and
see.
whether he follows through with it is a whole other story. I mean, how many
Absolutely.
campaign promises? I think two
100%.
things that stand out to me here are he has leverage in a way, obviously being the nominee, but aside from that, he had leverage in ways that Bernie didn't have. He didn't sit in the Senate any longer. Frankly, he is in the controlling force of the party. Like they control the rules. And I tweeted this out yesterday, and somehow it became an extremely controversial tweet where everybody from the New York Times to the National Review to Marcos Molitz, it was just a very strange response. But people wonder why Bernie didn't go harder. Why didn't he make it as clear on the debate stage the way that we wanted him to? And I think part of it, maybe intuitively, maybe he just had a better sense of some realities that he just didn't see the path forward for himself. And he wasn't willing to take those risks because he's still a senator in the Senate. And the fact that he has this much power in the Senate is mostly because of the spectacular campaign he ran in 2016 and bringing these issues to the forefront. But he also represents, a rising political coalition in Congress, mainly in Congress, and it's small, but, hopefully it's growing. And so, to lose whatever powers he has, whether it's, key committee appointments, I don't think that they would punish him. I think it would be too much of a big risk. But, there are other things that just don't get covered in the press, whether it's your budget for your staff got cut, or, you're divided. I don't know how they do this, but like you're divided from people that you would work with traditionally because you're on different committees. It's the tactical stuff. And especially for Congress, people like the squad, that's really, dangerous. And Biden had leverage over him. He didn't have anybody on him that way.
The point you're making now, I think, is the central point, which is really the big dividing line in all of this, which is that Sanders makes an assessment that he cannot win at one point. Mm-hmm. Right. And part of that may have been building for some time, but look, after Super Tuesday, it was quite obvious, I think. Yeah. And frankly, we had talked about all of the red flags that we saw. He wasn't bringing out the new voters that we had anticipated that he would. He was still winning, but he wasn't winning in the way that we thought that he would, that would have maybe the durability. And then, of course, there was this unprecedented thing. There's a story out today where Obama went in and, accelerated it between Bernie and Biden, but also accelerated it with Buttigieg, no doubt. No doubt. But at the beginning of the race, like everybody knows that that Biden has some institutional support. The big surprise was not that Obama stepped in with Buttigieg. I mean, maybe how that happened was a surprise, but the big surprise was that people weren't lining up in front of, for Biden because what we just saw, like, even when he's saying stuff that I'm happy he's saying, it's like, it makes it hard to sort of watch when he has, he stumbles through saying it.
Right.
But putting that aside, this notion of Sanders sort of making an assessment, I do not have the resources to win here. And I can decimate, look at this as like a military conflict. I don't have the ability to win here. I have two choices. I can decimate my army and still lose, or I can retain my army and win on other battlefields. I may not be able to win the war in the way, but I can carry the fight forward. There's plenty of metaphors for it. Moses, I can bring you to the land of Canaan, but I'm not going in, that type of thing. And this is a good entree into this tweet by Kyle Kulinski. I don't mean to equate these two things, but this is what we're seeing. So Kyle Kulinski tweeted this, and before I put this up, I just want to say that, like, I'm not going to fully engage in this argument right now because I think it's too early. Mm-hmm. And I've been saying this, but there's one or two things that I appreciate about it, and I want to use it just to explicate what we're talking about. So Kyle tweeted last night, as a left-winger who will not vote for Biden, I want you to know that I'm 100% okay with you blaming me if Trump wins a second term. I mean it. Blame me. Then get to thinking real hard how you're going to get me to support your candidate next time. Maybe even ask me. I'll tell you. Now, one thing, let me just start off by saying this. I respect the fact that Kyle took that tact, because the people who said this in 2016 I use Jimmy Dore as an example, just because that's the one that I dealt with the most on this. We're like, I'm going to teach the Democrats a lesson. I'm not going to vote for them. And if Hillary Clinton loses, they're going to have to come to me next time with a candidate and get me to vote for them. And then Hillary Clinton loses, and the first thing they say is, it's not my fault. We didn't make it happen, right. Which is ridiculous. Your whole strategy is, as Kyle points it out there, blame me if Trump wins, because then you got to come to me. This is his thinking. You got to come to me to win next time. And he's maybe right. If Trump wins, they got to come to him, or maybe they decide, maybe we got to get even more Republican votes. I mean, they could go either way.
I think you're being way too flexible on this. And I think this is like my lesson to whatever my audience is. Stop starting from the premise of they actually want to win. I'm really saying that's where I am. You know, maybe a good chunk of the campaigns think that they want to win and they're just taking leadership and guidance from the leaders. But if you're coming, I mean, really, after being on this commission and seeing how Tom Perez is operating, things that we've discussed, and then him not even doing them, I really do not think that they want to win. Just that he's not done a 50-state strategy. They know the problems, right? It's not like they don't know how to win. It's that they are not winning. And that would be like, okay, Kyle, it's your fault. It's like going to Susan Sarandon and be like, Susan Sarandon, it's your fault for losing us the election. Now, Susan, what can we do to win you back? They don't want us. The more we're in the party, the less they make, frankly. You know, the more oversight. The biggest fights that we had in this party were over contracts that they're making all the money for.
That was what your argument was in your video. And I want to get to that, but I want to get to the other half of the equation. I want to get to Kyle's half of the equation before we get to, I know you're saying that Kyle's equation is incorrect because he has wrong assumptions about the intent.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, it's based on this intention that they really want to win.
But let's just assume for the moment, for the sake of this conversation, because I want to get to the idea of what Bernie is up to too. Sure. And what AOC is, because Kyle does not have, first of all, he's right to say, blame me, because at the very least, then if his plan succeeds, which is Biden doesn't win, right? Because for his plan to succeed, Biden has to lose.
Right.
Because if Biden wins, then the party says, okay, we definitely don't need Kyle Kulinski. He's completely out of the picture. And I don't mean to pick on Kyle, but I'm just saying in terms. So for Kyle's plan to win, to succeed, two things have to happen. Biden has to lose, and there has to be a perception, at least, that the reason why Biden lost was because Kyle didn't vote for him. And obviously not just Kyle, but everybody that Kyle
he represents.
Yeah. And in 2016, the plan was Clinton has to lose, and then I'm going to pretend like I wasn't responsible for Clinton winning, and then somehow magic happens. At least Kyle has the two steps correct. Mm-hmm. The second step has to happen. It won't, just like it didn't happen last time. Otherwise, we wouldn't have Joe Biden. So we have an example of the failure of that strategy. And part of the problem is that there's not enough overwhelming evidence that, and there won't be this time either, just like there wasn't last time, that they actually caused the loss.
See, that's the point that I'm trying to say. They're still, and they're partially right. This is a hard moment, right? They're still of the mindset that the progressive base is going to fall in line. And I'm going to be real with you guys. We did in 2016. The majority of the progressive base who didn't show up, and they're not all progressive, I want to make that very clear, was working class. And that's really what the issue is. The progressive base represents working class interests, but it doesn't necessarily represent all of the working class.
Correct.
And so you had groups of voters in the Rust Belt, Pennsylvania, otherwise, who did not turn out in key states that they took for granted, but do not equate these two things. Jacobin readers are not always factory workers. They might be fighting for the factory workers. And I'm not, not the entire progressive movement is. Bernie Sanders, yes, he had factory workers, but some of these people, and this is where Bernie's misstep was too, his supporters were not all Democratic socialists. Some of them were hard Ds, like Democrats in the party, workers, union members. I mean, unions for the large part work very directly with the party. Whether it's their party leadership locally, whether it's a governor that they have to move to get something into a budget, they're beholden to the Democratic machinations. It's another reason why, we have to think really hard about third parties because, a good chunk of the people that we want to bring in are union workers who work with the party establishment directly to negotiate funds and contracts.
Relationships.
Exactly.
Yes.
So ultimately, we don't have that leverage. I keep saying we don't have that leverage.
That's what I'm saying is that the power is not there. And Sanders, I think, realizes in this moment that he did not have the power. He was not getting all of those people that he should have gotten to vote for him. And so the question is do you grind down what you have,
right,
and obliterate it, or do you maintain it so that you can fight in other areas? And this is the argument that I would make. Like, what happens if Joe Biden does win?
Right.
How irrelevant.
We have a real problem, guys.
Right.
We got to think about that.
Well, the point is that like if Joe Biden does win, Kyle Kulinski is no longer participating in the future. And that is like there's a time to go all in on a bet, which is what Kyle's doing here. He's going all in on a bet. And I'm holding off on just sort of like, I think, really drilling in on this because I am also perfectly willing to be open to the possibility that from a tactical standpoint, as these committees are going on, that this is helpful. It could get more from these actual committees. And we'll talk about that in a moment. So, I want to just put that caveat in the sake of this conversation. But if Joe Biden wins, because, 85% of Bernie Sanders voters, which is all you really need, come out and vote for Biden, in addition to all the other people who voted for Biden, and, extrapolated to a general election. Joe Biden wins. Kyle Kulinski's out of the conversation. Now, I'm not saying that he would have ever been in. I'm just using this as an example, right? And
found Justice Democrats, so in one sense, he actually does have some leverage.
Yeah.
I mean,
and so the point is that you've then made it impossible for you to impact going forward, and that's the tightrope that AOC is walking. She is going like, what she's saying is, I'm going to vote for, and I'm going to support the Democratic nominee. But the Democratic nominee needs to make it easier for me to bring my people along.
That's right.
And because I know what my limitations are, and I cannot sell, ice to, an Eskimo. Whatever that saying is. And I don't think that's not an offensive saying, right? I mean, ice, I can't sell ice to someone who lives in
Buffalo.
the Antarctic, in Buffalo. And you need to offer something so that I can go to my people and say, come along. Now, Kulinski does that. The ask is pretty big. He wants Medicare for all, or I can't remember what the second thing was. But I think that's probably a bigger ask than you're going to get at this stage. Otherwise, what was the point of Bernie Sanders?
Right.
Right.
So there's a, Bernie was the leverage. Just as I said this to Michael last week when I was on the show, that, I said all the leverage, Bernie was that leverage. There's no leverage after Bernie. He's the leverage. And once he's out of the race, poof, it's gone. I mean, it might change over time. It might change in a few months. There's lots of different scenarios here, but I just, I just messaged you an article from 2017 that this reminds me of a very similar moment in August of 2000. I'm sorry, it was updated in April of 2017, and it was published December of 2016, right after Trump was elected. And it was an article about how I was involved in this, and it was a group of surrogates and staffers on Bernie's campaign who demanded at the convention in a little basement, or no, it was in another room, I can't remember, at the convention, to meet with Hillary's team, political team, and discuss strategy moving forward. I think this was like on day 2. We knew that there was going to be a walkout. They didn't know yet. We were just involved in a lot of conversations with delegates in which things were growing to such a level that was like going to be shocking on television or otherwise. And of course it did. And so we went to them and we said, listen, like, we're really worried because we just don't see you guys doing anything in the Rust Belt. We don't see you moving on things like TPP and fracking, which we had polling and I forgot some other sort of data that showed that if they didn't move certain votes 1%, 2%, they would lose in Wisconsin, they lose in Michigan, they lose in Pennsylvania, because there's this crossover. And they sat there with us. Somebody recorded the conversation. We went back and assessed it and listened to it again after Hillary lost. And turns out they lost in all those states. They didn't listen. They didn't even. There were people that were big surrogates on the Bernie campaign who wanted to get involved in the Hillary campaign. And they literally gave him a giant F you. And this was an example of that. I mean, the title of this piece is Hillary fucking ignored us in swing states. That was the title of the piece.
And I think, that's a good segue into these task force things, because this seems to me to be a mechanism at the very least where maybe, again, this is about like hope and potential and, this is smart by the Biden people. I don't know if they're actually going to do it. But I don't know what else you can get out of the situation. You're not going to get Joe Biden to come out tomorrow and say, I'm for Medicare for all now. But you could get Joe Biden out there to have basically Bernie people develop relationships. I mean, that's really what you're talking about. It is really, in many respects, it's sort of like, I'm dealing with, blankety blank over here, and they sort of know what they're talking about. And, so there's room here. Here is Sanders laying out the task forces between Biden and Sanders' campaign staff.
In the White House. So I will do all that I can to see that happens, Joe. And I know that there is an enormous responsibility on your shoulders right now. And it's imperative that all of us work together to do what has to be done, not only in this moment, but beyond this moment, in the future of this country. And in that regard, I have been very pleased that your staff and my staff have been working together over the last several weeks to coming up with a number of task forces. These are task forces that will look at some of the most important issues facing this country. The economy, how we create an economy that works for all, not just a few. Education, how we create the best educational system in the world for all of our people. How we deal with climate change, which, as you indicated, is an existential threat to the planet. How we deal with criminal justice, because we don't want to continue having more people in jail than any other country on earth. How we deal with immigration reform, and how we have a healthcare system that is so much better than what we have right now.
So there it is. I mean, they're basically outlining these task force, and I would imagine what they're going to do is they're going to send people, policy people from the Sanders camp. They're going to meet, hopefully, with policy people from the Biden camp, and look, I think this is a pretty good setup because they can't afford to be complete a-holes about it.
No.
And that's just assuming, presuming the worst case of these people. Like some of the people on Biden's economic team when he was VP were pretty good. some were bad. There's at least the opportunity. I mean, at least what's going on is listening, right?
It's symbolic. I mean, in my opinion, I'm in another. I think they realize how outrageous the Clintons were. And if you remember at the convention, just thinking about the convention again, there was this. The convention was definitely a Clinton convention. I mean, you had Michael Bloomberg on stage. You had 4-star generals that were, chanting war, war, war. I mean, it was a crazy convention. But the time that we separated that nasty rhetoric. Oh, and this is what I was going to say about that article, is that what came out of that was that Hillary Clinton added a couple of lines about reaching out to progressives into her speech. And it was, they told us, they specifically said, we're going to have her open up, her arms a little bit to the progressive movement. It was just, instead of the Clintons saying, how can we bring these people in? They were constantly thinking of ways of how to fuck us over. And I think at the convention, if you recall, there were 3 or maybe even 4 moments in prime time that were relief. And it was when Obama spoke, it was when Biden spoke, and it was when Michelle Obama spoke as well. It was just a different mindset. And nobody could tell them clearly what to do or how to say things or script them. They had to have speaking spots at the convention, with exception, of course, to Bernie himself. And they just spoke to us in a more inclusive way. I think if you have a chance to go back and watch those speeches, listen, I'm not giving them credit. Let me be very clear. They still believe what they believe. And I still think that they're going to get away with the centrist neoliberal platform that they're going to give away with, but they're at least going to create an appearance of respecting us.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a difference between there's a difference between like respecting and actually doing what you want them to, and I think they're showing at least some respect. Yeah. It may be because look, they're all politicians. They're showing the respect because they believe that it's important, but that's what respect is in politics, that you have value and we're recognizing that you have value and that we need you on some level. Right. How desperately we need you, it depends on what kind of price you're extracting from us. But I guess the point is, and I think the point that like AOC was making in this interview was that it provides some measure of hope. I do think that if you have a half a dozen task force and if it's staffed in a sincere way and there's a sincere intent, that there's an opportunity to move things to the left. That, I can't help but think when I look at Joe Biden, that there's a quality of like, the king has got lung cancer, and it's like some Game of Thrones type of thing where the king's got lung cancer and he's sitting in bed and coughing up blood, and and everybody's around him, and it's like all the dukes and the princesses and the princes and this and that, and they're all scheming as to who's going to take over the kingdom. And I do feel like there's a quality of that going on with Biden's campaign. Like,
absolutely.
I mean, maybe I'm just projecting that, but that there is an air of like,
well, at least with the vice presidential picks. I mean,
whether or not around and we don't know where we're going. Yeah. And
well, that's definitely with Cuomo. I mean, honestly, people think, oh, Cuomo is going to be replaced. No, if anything, he'll have the vice presidential pick. But he was interviewed by his brother like a week ago, and his brother asked him whether or not he's going to run for president, run for vice president. And you could actually see it in Andrew Cuomo's face that he, he's very good at lying. He did not have a poker face on. There was something about that humility, whatever it is that comes out when he's with his brother, that I think actually worked against him. So I think that there's, he's been really strange about Elizabeth Warren, Cuomo. Kamala Harris set up a joint fundraising agreement with the DNC, which normally would signal that you are on the ticket. But who knows in this world? So I think there is a little bit of that Game of Thrones with the vice presidential forces, the people who are attached to them who want to be in the White House,
I think there is a lot of machinations going on there. And I think that things are going to get carved up in a way that I just don't feel like, when Obama became president, they were in such control that at this time, maybe I'm thinking like it was closer to June. But in June,
don't forget the RFK line.
Right. In June of 2008, the Obama people were basically saying outside groups, do not give any money to outside groups. All money comes to us. Everything runs through us. We control everything. They were on top of all of it. And there is a real sense that part of it is contextualized in terms of this environment. You do have groups like Justice Democrats. You do have like outside groups like Matriarch for that, and for that matter. You have these outside groups that exist that are in some ways like very confrontational with the Democratic establishment. Never mind, and they have their alternate funding sources.
Right.
And so that context is different. And also, I just don't think that Biden's got the apparatus that has the control on all these things. I just don't think that it exists in the same way. And they, look, if
that's interesting. It's an interesting story someone should work on. If there's any investigative reporters, look at his apparatus and what their relationships are with just editor Nomi here.
And here's the other thing. Let's just, and I don't know, but let's just for a moment game out what happens if this coronavirus stuff ends or abates during from let's say September and October into November, August, September, October. Joe Biden had no physical campaign.
That's right.
Or, maybe that's a slight exaggeration, but very little of one. And they're going to need to rely heavily on the infrastructure that Sanders built if they are to get people
that's
on
the
ground
leverage
in a couple of months at the end. And so
that's good.
Nobody knows. It could end up being like, this is the campaign. It's just going to be a series of Zoom, meetings. And then everybody's going to vote from home. And it's just, here's my joystick. I vote for, Biden, boom. But if things get a little more normalized, there could be some leverage there.
But big media is presidential races. I mean, it really does. Field in modern history hasn't been as significant as it frankly should be. I think for a lot of us, we would like it to be more so. But for the establishment, they have put millions and millions into buying ads. It's just gotten a lot closer than it should have been, where Field was a factor that could have won, Hillary the election, or maybe just setting up an office, for instance.
Right. Yeah. Or you could have known that hey, wait a second, our algorithms are wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Where do we have Jamie? Has Jamie gotten on?
Jamie.
Matt, Brendan. All right, let's bring her on because I want to turn to some other stuff, but I'm waiting for her to want to hear about how
she is.
Hi, Jamie. That's a bad sign.
Can't hear you. Can she hear us?
Oh, here I am. I can hear
you. There you are.
Okay.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Jamie. So did you want to weigh in on this?
Oh, yeah, sure. I have so many thoughts. I didn't know if I was going to get to talk about this or not, but I jotted down some notes. Maybe they'll be a valuable offering to the conversation. I don't know. You decide. Man, oh man. I've been saying all along that Trump was going to be a tough guy to beat because of the social forces that haven't changed since 2016, and if anything, have intensified. I think there is some evidence, including polls, that Bernie would have been the strongest candidate to beat Trump this time around, even though that's far from certain in these uncertain times. But if you look at Glenn Greenwald's article in The Intercept, most people, most non-voters, it's a group that skews disproportionately poor, disproportionately non-white. So that kind of destroys the argument that not voting is something only privileged people do.
That's right.
He looked into this and has hard data on that. And most of the non-voters don't not vote because they're being suppressed, although that is certainly a factor. It's not because they're ignorant. It's because they don't want to vote. And it's because they don't believe that electoral politics are going to change anything about their lives in any material way. And you know what? It's hard to argue with them when they have years and years of evidence to the contrary. So the argument on the socialist left, going back to Lenin, right, is we need to meet the reason why leftist parties should participate in quote unquote bourgeois parliaments or elections is that we need to meet people where they are, right? These kinds of politics, they enjoy widespread legitimacy among the working class. Therefore, it would be the sign of an infantile disorder for leftists to ignore them, right? This comes from a pamphlet called Left-Wing Communism, an infantile disorder. And he was writing somewhat in dialogue with Rosa Luxemburg, who was a communist working in Germany. She argued that we need to be ready. She allowed that these parliamentary tactics made sense at the time, probably, especially in Germany, but argued that we need to be ready to change our course if they, for example, outlaw suffrage, right? And looking at all those people who were waiting in line for hours to vote in a pandemic and just the utter illegitimacy of these elections, it made me think about that. So I am skeptical about electoral tactics in general, but not across the board, right? I support the DSA in New York, for example, our resolution to elect a socialist city council. I think that's a good example of what needs to happen, building these things locally from the ground up. The Bernie campaign was trying to skip some steps, right? And I understand why, because we are in desperate times and we need desperate changes, and we just don't have that much time to build the kinds of working class institutions that people trust and that are independent from capitalist political parties and these kinds of vast movements that would really enable wins on that kind of level. But unfortunately, I think that there really aren't any shortcuts. Like, we need to be building tenant unions, labor unions, transit riders unions, welfare rights organizations, and more, because I think at the end of the day, I mean, you just had a guy on the other day talking about how illegitimate most of the people in this country view our electoral institutions to be. And especially a lot of the people who are the most oppressed by capitalism have no faith in them whatsoever. So I think if our goal, and our goals, you know, I'll admit aren't exactly the same, but I think a lot of the steps on the way there are the same. And a lot of the things that we are going to be doing in the fight to overthrow capitalism will also result in wins for the working class and the kinds of social democratic policies that everybody on this panel would like to see. There are no shortcuts. Like, I think the biggest point of radicalization for a lot of people and the most bang for your buck that you get is when you come into direct conflict, direct confrontation with capital, the workplace, right, versus the boss, the home versus the landlord, people protesting in the streets against police violence, against ICE, and against the terror that is being perpetrated on working class communities, especially Black and brown working class communities, right, with the police and with ICE. So I just think I'm not going to get depressed about the Bernie campaign. I was a team player. I drove to New Hampshire. I volunteered. But the fight goes so far beyond Bernie, and it has to if we're going to get anywhere. And I see a lot of openings. I see a lot of potential. And I'm also incredibly scared because the task is enormous and we don't have that much time, like Noam Chomsky said. But yeah, does any of that make sense to you?
Yeah,
Sorry,
go ahead, Nomi.
I was just going to say, you brought up an interesting point about how just the localization. I think one aspect of localization that we have to keep in mind here is, I think it was strategic. There was this strategic move away from localization, whether it's by parties or attacking unions. And so, there's a reason why a lot of working class people don't feel hopeful in whether they did 30 years ago or not. I mean, there are actual shifts in turnout. They don't trust institutions, especially if you're younger, and they don't feel hopeful in our political establishment, partly because nobody was there for them to offer them an alternative. And when you swoop in every 4 years for a presidential election, you claim to be, people are over that. And so I do think that there's a real opening here that is, been partly addressed in the last 4 years, but now without Bernie kind of sucking the oxygen away, that's not a negative thing. It's just a reality. There's more of an opportunity for us to get hyper localized, but
right.
And not just with elections,
but
right?
Yes,
because people don't, this is like the aid and other efforts in the communities where we live. If people only hear from us when we're trying to get them to vote for our candidate, even if our candidate has policies that would help them, they're going to think that's bullshit.
Well, that's the interesting thing about that study that you cite from Greenwald, because what that study suggests is that if I'm running for office, that I should not appeal to those people, because the breakdown of those people from a ideological breakdown is basically one third, left-leaning, conservative, and independent on those people who don't engage. And one of the things that was disappointing about the Sanders campaign was, and maybe it's not something that can happen this quickly, but it was disappointing because that was part of the promise of it, is that none of those people were reached. But those people tend to be basically just sort of like, I don't believe in politics.
Yeah.
And people that we talk about that have the privilege are really the ones that we hear from because they're on Twitter.
Oh, without a doubt. And like, so I have this frustration just as somebody who is seen obviously more electoral, but when we're too busy researching history and not researching the tactics that got us to that point in history, we're missing the bigger argument here. So, unions, we want to build up unions. Who's attacking unions? It's political players that are attacking unions, political organizations, political, elected officials, big donors. So we can sit here and build up unions from the ground up. But as long as there are major institutions that are dictated by the electoral politics of today, we really are just going to be fighting an endless battle of being kicked in the face. And so I think you're completely right, Jamie. I just think that we as a movement need to graduate a little bit from the phase of researching history and reading Jacobin and Marx and being theoretical, and actually researching a little bit more Carville, a little bit more Karl Rove, to see how power functions. Otherwise, we're just going to be hitting our heads against the wall and saying like, well, let's just pass Medicare for all, or I'm not voting for Joe Biden until he supports Medicare for all. Well, even if he does, it doesn't mean that he's going to pass it. They're geniuses when it comes to process. And I think as a movement, we need to get into that process a little bit more, understand how the sausage is made. Otherwise, we're going to keep making the same mistakes over and over and then get frustrated and angry when we're defeated or crushed. And, as you know too well, Jamie, like our unions are imperfect. And the leadership operates from a political, all unions operate from a political perspective, as we were saying before you got on. They have to negotiate with the governors, to get in the budget. It's real, sausage is made in a very dirty way. And that's where any sort of theories of change that they have get thrown out the window.
Well, yeah. And sometimes people have to strike against their own unions, like we're seeing with the wave of wildcat strikes spreading across the UC system right now. I mean, from reading a bit of Mike Davis, the historian, the Marxist historian, I understand that the reason why unions originally became recuperated by the Democratic Party was following the historic defeat of organized labor. But there was a feedback effect whereby, the more they compromised, the more they were defeated. The more they were defeated, the more they have to compromise. So I don't think that's ever going to be a winning battle for organized labor. And it's up to the rank and file to really demonstrate for democracy and for a new kind of unionism that looks beyond just digging in and saving the narrow benefits that they have left, including the very right to unionize. I mean, what you were saying before, Sam, it makes sense, right? It's a bit of a catch-22 because it's hard to win elections without a record of policies that help people. But it's hard to get those policies in place if you don't win elections. Right. So that is one drawback to this mode of organizing, I think, as a tactic and why it shouldn't be centered. If you look back to how we got these things in history, including the very right to unionize, people fought for them and people died for them. And I understand it's also a heavy lift to ask people to fight and put their bodies on the line in some cases. But they both seem very hard and they both have a lot of pros and cons to them.
But it wasn't it wasn't exclusively.
Right. Thank you.
People fought and died for them. Frances Perkins comes in.
That's right.
And she's pulled out of, wherever she was in Massachusetts and comes in and actually institutes, I guess what we would call technocratic reforms. And it's really just like, you put a different person in that role, and maybe we don't see these things. Taft-Hartley handicapped unions tremendously. And as time went on, even more so. I mean, so there's a lot of this is also going to be done legislatively. And I guess that's, the point is like, there's a time to hold them and there's a time to fold them. And if you don't have the cards, you can bluff all you want. But at the end of the day, then what you got to do is work on it. Like, there's also legislative processes, and it's less sort of like glamorous. It's more of a grind, and it could turn on just like this person in that role, in this, making that decision about this thing that created this opportunity. I mean, there's a lot of that goes on that I think is, just not as sexy or as alluring. And I'm not saying that one supplants the other, but I am saying that one does not supplant the other. That they both have an important role, and one can defeat the other. I mean, one can inhibit the value of the other, and more so like, all right, well, I
agree with you on that, but I think these electoral tactics should always come out of larger movements and demands and not the other way around, because that is putting the cart before the horse. And I do think we need to have the ability to analyze the current material conditions at play and decide which tactics should be prioritized in this moment. Also, the frustrating part is workers do hold all the cards. They just don't all realize it yet. Right? Until they replace everybody with robots, we have that leverage. And the problem and the project, the great $1 million question of the left, has always been how to get everybody conscious of that and working together.
Is it a bigger task to do, or maybe it's both, I feel, but is it a bigger task? The moment that we're facing in right now, as we saw in this election, is maybe most workers, half the workers, I don't know what the breakdowns would be, are not consuming information in the same form. And how do you educate people? Can you educate people the same way you did in the 50s or in the early 1900s? I mean, I know that's sort of a broader question, but it just seems like it just seems like a task that's a little bit larger than this immediate moment in educating workers. And granted, they're figuring it out given COVID, but
I think workers already know more than they get credit for knowing. Listening to some reports from the Amazon union organizing efforts, people know that they're getting screwed over. A lot of them just don't know that there's anything they can do about it. And it's been really inspiring to watch people realize that in real time and come around to some very radical politics through practical activity, right? Because political education is important. It's a major project of all of ours, but it's never going to be enough. Most people learn in that crucible of struggle. And I think we're seeing conditions get really crazy right now, and things are starting to seem possible that didn't even seem possible a few months ago.
Even Joe Biden sees it. All right, let's, I want to play some clips here. Here is, speaking of unions, I mean, this is sort of a performance of the moment. Here's Richard Trumka. He is the AFL-CIO president. He is on with Maria Bartiromo. And here is, I mean, this is just sort of amazing to me that anybody associated with the financial industry can talk about moral hazard in this way. She is afraid that if people get an extra $600 a week for unemployment insurance, that there's going to be a lot of people. And again, it's also showing an incredible ignorance about what unemployment insurance, who qualifies. You cannot quit and get unemployment insurance. But here is Maria Bartiromo basically letting her ignorant flag fly.
Think about this paycheck program, Richard, because, there's some criticism about it, certainly from Senator Lindsey Graham, among others, who's going to be coming up on the show later on, who has said, look, in some states, this flat $600 that are being given to workers, in some states, it will mean that the worker is making more money because depending on where the minimum wage is, the worker is making more money to stay home then he or she would be making on the job. And that's going to hurt productivity, and that's going to hurt any sort of enthusiasm to come back on the job. Why should I go back to work if I'm making more money staying home?
That's ridiculous. Look, people define themselves by the work that they do.
Pause
and if you give workers money,
let me give you what the proper answer is. That's ridiculous. 17 million people have lost their jobs that we know about right now. It's probably 22 million. What job are they going to go back to over the next 6 weeks, you idiot? That's how you respond to that. But he was a little more polite. Go ahead.
that's ridiculous. Look, people define themselves by the work that they do. And if you give workers money, our country's 72% driven by consumer spending. Put money in people's pockets and they will spend it. Even if somebody gets a little bit more than what they would have been getting on minimum wage, so what? It's going to help the economy. No one says anything when we give big loans to Jamie Dimon or anybody else. Give that worker that money. They'll spend it. They'll create demand. That demand will help us keep the economy going again.
All right, I'll tell Senator Graham what you said when he comes up, and I'll push back on that with that line of thinking, Richard.
I mean, it's even like, okay, yes, it helps the economy to give people money. That's true. But the idea that people are going to stay on unemployment for this, like there's no option for people to go back to work. This is just bizarre. It is so disingenuous. Like, is she that stupid, or is she just lying?
I mean, she's showing their ass a little bit, right? Because capitalists and those who uphold such a system believe that there's no reason why people would work other than because they'll starve to death if they don't. They can't imagine people working for any other reason because they find value in the task that they're doing or the function that they're serving for society.
I think that's true. It's also, there's no work right now. there's not like, you're not going to go out and find like a ton of work other than, I guess the idea is like, we want more people to go in and work in the Amazon warehouse, or we want people to, clean the bedpans in the hospitals and risk getting infected. I mean, that's the only thing they could be talking about.
She hosts a Wall Street show. Like,
I know.
Who's she speaking to? She's speaking to the morning Wall Street audience. I mean, they're delusional, and she's trying to keep their hopes up so that the market doesn't crash. I don't know what they're doing right now with Wall Street, but I think there's a delusional mindset that I guess does protect us in some way or form. But yeah, she's not speaking to a general audience.
And that's probably why Trump talks about it in those terms, in terms of the economy, because he's talking to people who only care about the stock market. And he's saying, like, look, I understand that you have to suffer because because these workers are getting an extra maybe $50 a week or something like that. And that's horrible, but it will benefit you. That's the argument that he has to make to placate these vampires. It's really stunning. All right. And also, this is something I think we can all relate to. I feel like I am having an existential crisis every, 15, 20 minutes. The only time that I feel like I'm not having a breakdown is on the show for the 2 or 3 hours I do it. But here is Chris Cuomo on the Howard Stern show talking about his experience having coronavirus and being stuck at home.
Because I don't want to spend my time doing things that I don't think are valuable enough to me personally. Like what? Well, I don't like what I do professionally, I've decided. I like doing this show. I like talking to you guys. But I don't value indulging irrationality, hyperpartisanship. I don't think it's worth my time. And I don't want some jackass, loser, fat tire biker to be able to pull over and get in my face and in my space and talk bullshit to me. I don't want to hear it. And just like you would, right? You're not going to tolerate that, right? Some cat just basically pulls up in the driveway next to yours and starts getting in your face about stuff. How's that going to go? How's that going to go, right? That matters to me more than making millions of dollars a year. That matters to me more. Why? Because I've saved my money. because
and he ends with that. Because my brother's going to be president in 2 years, and I'm not going to be allowed to be on TV anyways. So let's just be real.
That's what you want. You got to save that FU money is basically what he's talking about.
If you listen hard enough in that clip, you can hear the world's tiniest violin playing.
I appreciate his having that this sort of like a crisis on air, but it's so funny that he has like a specific guy in mind who apparently has been harassing him that he doesn't appreciate. Like this dude keeps driving up and calling him Fredo, and he doesn't like it.
I don't believe him until he has a Sam Cedar beard.
Exactly.
You don't have an existential crisis.
Exactly. Grow a beard, buddy. You'll get fired from your show very quickly.
Because there's only one beard at CNN. It's Wolf Blitzer.
There you go. No, I mean, I think everybody's feeling it. I wish I had like a, let's see. Is this going to work now? Yeah, there we go. Something like that. I don't have well, I mean, that's good. He's having a little bit of, I wonder if he's sort of thinking that Andrew is going to be president and maybe I can get a job there and I'll be a little bit more low key or something.
Or maybe he just doesn't need a job.
Yeah.
And he was off to a good start, right? Like, where is he going with this? Has he realized he's just a bootlicker and a servant to power? No, he just doesn't like getting yelled at and he has enough money anyway. So what's he doing?
I got to say that if I had been making that kind of money for a couple of years, I'd be gone. I'd take off. I'm done. I'd hang it all up.
He also lives in Long Island.
Maybe I'd do 2 days a week. Maybe I would do 2 days a week or something like that. But I don't know. Chris Cuomo, who knows if he'll make it back? Like, that's the thing. There's going to be so many changes, I think, when we're outside of this era. And I don't know if we're going to be outside of this era and I don't want to freak anybody out here because I don't think this era is going to be like it is now. I think we're going to go through different forms of this era. But I don't think that we're going to be talking about the coronavirus era or epoch or whatever it is in retrospect until I think for another 12 to 18 months, at least when we look back on it. I don't know what it's going to look like in 2 months from now or 3 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow, remember when people went to work instead of working from their homes? Or
do you think that people will finally learn how to use masks and gloves? Because every week I go to the grocery store and every week I'm disgusted by the people like spitting on the produce and not wearing gloves and masks. Oh yeah. That was my experience yesterday. There was a very young couple
spitting on your produce.
They were just like talking and like spit was coming out of their mouth. I mean, this is what you have to be aware of is there are people who abide by the rules. We all know this and those who don't. And in states like South Dakota, where they're in denial and people are dying in pork, from a pork factory plant. That's a new hotspot.
Yep.
And in Arizona, where, it's the wild, wild west and conspiracy theories are the law of the land. That's what we're facing.
You mentioned South Dakota. That is the case. They refused to do any of the social distancing there. And the governor was very reluctant to do a stay-at-home thing. And there's been a big, I think it's a Smithfield plant. Dozens upon dozens of people contracted it there. They provide in that one plant like 5% of the country's pork.
It's insane.
Now, I think, look, I mean, I think that's creepy in and of itself. We're going to start to see shortages. Both from like on processed meat, but we're also going to start to see shortages in terms of produce because a lot of people who pick are also going to come down with this because they're not getting protected in the proper way. And we also have a supply line thing that is akin to the toilet paper dilemma, which is that we have two separate streams of toilet paper distribution. One is for institutions, one is for the home. People are spending more time at home, so they're using 40% more domestic toilet paper, and the two streams never cross. So the people who provide the institutional toilet paper are sitting on a lot of toilet paper and don't know how to get it to the people at home. It is the same thing with food production. They don't know how to get it to supermarkets or to even to like homeless shelters. And so there's a lot of problem with that.
Well, in a lot of cases, they're actually contractually not allowed to do that.
They're burning
contracts
stuff.
with
yeah,
their
exactly.
Which is, I mean, it's many crises of capitalism have been crises of overproduction. And it just doesn't make any sense to me to have a system where fields of crops are being burned at the same time that people are starving in the streets.
Donald Trump could right now use the Defense Production Authorization or Act, I think, to negate those contracts.
What is his biggest dilemma there? Is it just that he wants to allocate?
Chamber of Commerce said don't do it.
That's it. Okay.
Chamber of Commerce said don't do it, and that's who he listens to. I think that's it. Here, speaking of South Dakota, here is the South Dakotan governor. This is rather unfortunate timing. He's on she's on. It's Kristi Noem on with Ainsley Earhart, talking about a hydroxychloroquine testing. Announcing this on the day that Brazil has announced they're stopping providing that for treatment because it gives because of the incidence of cardiac arrest. The French have also stopped issuing it for the exact same reason. And check this out.
I interviewed a local lawmaker from Michigan, and she said that hydroxychloroquine, she feels like saved her life. She said, I was nearing death. I'd been infected for weeks, and I took this drug, and I immediately saw a difference. And she says it saved her life. There's been controversy about this drug, and your state is implementing or having some sort of a clinical trial. Tell us what's going on there.
Well, we wanted to go on offense against this virus. So I announced yesterday, in partnership with our three major health systems, that we would do the first ever statewide, state-backed clinical research drug trial on using hydroxy for these COVID-19 positive patients. It's a unique situation where we have all of our healthcare systems on the same page participating, and it's the first ever state-backed and statewide trial. I think this will give us an opportunity to help patients. We have the opportunity, with the help of the federal government and the White House, of having enough doses that we could treat up to 100,000 people in our state. And that's going to allow us the opportunity to have a therapeutic that could make all the difference in the world for those that are high risk or vulnerable.
When will the trial be wrapped up? Because so many people who have COVID, they want to take this drug.
Well, it's already started. We have folks that we received the drugs from the federal government. The hydroxy came in this weekend, and so we already have patients that are taking this, and we have this all set up as a voluntary participation program between a patient and their doctor. And Sanford Health will be leading the initiative and the trial. They're experts at this. They have a research arm that has done so many good work and so much good work in so many different areas that we're excited they're leading it, and it'll start with 2,000 patients in a separate drug trial, but we can treat up to 100,000 people throughout the state that may be struggling with the virus.
I appreciate the fact that there are this is a state-run program, and that the state has taken over the hospital system, and that they realize the most efficient way to do these type of things is through public apparatus. But the idea that Ainsley Harris, like, a lot of people want to take this drug. Like, it's just unbelievable.
It's like Alex Jones selling some sort of potion on air. It's
nuts. And, I hope that, knock on wood, it is effective, and that it's being done in a responsible way, that if they get some feedback that this is causing, heart conditions and is more problematic than it is helpful, they'll stop, because you really get the sense of like somebody's vying for a position in the administration or something like that.
Yeah, I'm just surprised Ainsley Earhart didn't finish it by announcing that hydroxychloroquine will now be available at all chicken salad chick locations.
Exactly.
The hydroxychloroquine thing is just like how Americans are only empowered as consumers. So we need a new product that's going to hit the market. That's going to fix it.
My friend who has a chicken salad restaurant, she took it. She says it's great. She's putting it in all the sandwiches now. But the federal government is regulating it. The federal government's regulating it so tightly that she's not allowed to use it in any of her sandwiches, and it's hurting her business. That's what I heard.
Do better, federal government.
Oh my God.
So Brian Kilmeade, again, it's like, that's all it is that each one of these Fox and Friends, they have one friend. And everything that they comment on is a function of that one friend telling them that. For Ainsley Earhart, everything it comes from this woman who has a chicken salad like franchise. And Brian Kilmeade clearly knows somebody, maybe it's his brother or whoever, has a small business and is pissed about these loans. Here he is talking to Lindsey Graham, trying to get some action on this. This is Brian Kilmeade on Fox and Friends.
We got to fix this loan program. I don't mean to change topics, but the 75-25 split needs to change. And there are people applying for this small business loan that really are liquid as they can be, and they're taking advantage of it. The money should be for Main Street, and some people are abusing this system.
Yeah, you can't keep employees. Yeah, you can't keep employees if they have no owner. People have to remember there has to be an owner and employees, not just employees. I don't know what it takes to get through these people.
What he's saying is that what he is saying is that the money, they have to give money more than 25% to the owner. Now, here's the thing.
Gotcha.
The loan is this. You can get a loan for any number that you want. You can apply for the loan. What they will forgive in terms of basically giving you a grant, theoretically, is, to my understanding, 10 weeks worth of payroll and rent. Right. And I'm not sure how they calculate payroll. Maybe it includes the benefits. I think maybe it also includes benefits in terms of healthcare and stuff like that. And maybe it includes like taxes. I'm not sure. But the gist of it is, we're going to pay you. We're going to give you the money to pay your employees for 10 weeks and your rent for 10 weeks. And Kilmeade is upset because apparently, like, maybe you're only allowed another 25% after that it presumably goes into the pocket of the owner, right? Maybe there's some other costs. Maybe they took out a big loan and they need to service that loan or whatnot. But he hates the idea that this is going to workers.
It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, we can't have workers running around in the world without any owners. Someone's got to own them.
Filter there.
And then the amazing thing is that Lindsey Graham is the same guy who complains about if you were to fire those people,
right,
that they would get any type of money to basically bring them whole on the unemployment side. He's the one who complained about the extra $600 a week on unemployment,
right? Because
unemployment doesn't pay you 100% of what you had. So like, he is basically squeezing on both sides. Not a word about the $450 billion. And then the $4 trillion that are being leveraged to corporate America. Not a word about the $50 billion. You're an airline. Boom. We don't even need an application. Here's the money. That's basically it.
It's like those, how Neil Cavuto on the Business Channel, he was famous for having people on to, talking about the hamster wheel studies and, oh, look at all this waste. And it's 0.0000001%, but let's end the program. I mean, it's just the same tactics over and over.
This concept of waste is, I think, the thing that that I've been thinking about in the context of what we're going through right now, the idea of waste and the idea of externalities. When they got rid of the head of the pandemic response team who sat on the National Security Council, when they got rid of the head of the pandemic response who sat in Department of Homeland Security, when they got rid of the CDC people who were embedded in China, who were there specifically to look for pandemics as a early warning system, when they got rid of the entire team in China, they were basically saying, like, this is waste.
Yeah.
Because on
this argument they made.
Because we're not using it.
Right.
And like the idea, this is insurance. It's social insurance is basically what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea of waste that we need to have, like, so many of our problems that we're going to experience, that we're experiencing now and we're going to experience over the next year, is a function of this hypersensitivity to waste. That is why we have a just-in-time supply lines, which is going to mean that we don't have the ability. There's nothing in the system that is sitting there for any period of time, which means we're going to have shortages. It means that it's a just-in-time supply line is the metaphor for not having a pandemic response team. Like the pandemic response team just sits there. They don't do anything until there's a pandemic. And then they save you trillions of dollars, but they could go for 20 years or 40 years and do nothing that benefits society other than providing this insurance policy for when you'll ultimately need it. That's what Medicare for All is. That's what a social, a structure that exists with a social, support system, so that when society runs into these things, as a society, you can recover much more easily. And it's the same with individuals. When individuals run into these situations, you can recover much more easily. You cannot stop a pandemic necessarily. You can mitigate it, but you can't stop its existence. You can't stop the existence of the coronavirus, but you can structure society in a way that it's not a shock. It's not a trauma to the society, one that's going to reverberate for generations. And I think, we're going to come out of this with a greater understanding of that. And it's going to be much harder to make this argument. And, the question is like, who is flexible enough in their thinking to be able to make this turn? And I am not terribly encouraged that Joe Biden is that flexible, but maybe he is. I mean, I like the idea that he pivoted on some level, like we can't return to this. I mean, at least he's saying the words, which is better than not saying the words.
There's also the other aspect of it is, okay, so you have a pandemic, and I mean, Trump obviously knew about this pandemic in late last year, and he chose actively to double down on cutting funding and rejecting any sort of assistance, knowing very well, because they knew the signs going in, that it was very similar to some of the scenarios of SARS. And I mean, the WHO was doing the work. Like they were providing the research and the evidence. And I think many people would probably say at this point, his mind automatically goes to, how can I make a buck off of this? And so I'm going to reject the gear and figure out who can, if My Pillow guy or Jared Kushner or whatever their investment strategy is, it's such mental gymnastics to get there. And I don't think he still figured it out. But there's the rejection and there's the intentional austerity, not because we can't afford it, but because it's waste. And that's the argument that Republicans make when they go on Fox News. And then there's, how do I make a buck off of it? And then on top of it, there's the other, the disaster capitalism aspect, which is, how do I make a buck off of the effects of austerity and the crisis that's hit communities across the country.
I'm convinced.
Never let a good crisis go to waste, right?
Yes,
exactly.
I'm convinced that's what it was about with the testing. I'm convinced that's what it was with the testing. We would have had this testing. All right. Well, so I don't know. Do we leave anything on the table? I don't think so. We covered everything today.
Everyone's living paycheck to paycheck, from the workers up to the airlines and the big banks. It just so happens that when they fuck up, they have us all bail them out.
Yep.
Indeed. I mean, that's, we never hear the term moral hazard. This is the second time around for these financial institutions. They're getting money loaned at 0% interest. And everybody can make money at that. All it's doing is, we're all driving under a yellow flag, except for one, narrow segment and the most powerful segment of our society. And they get the full flag, the green flag, or whatever I don't know my NASCAR flags.
I took you as a NASCAR guy, Sam. I'm really kind of surprised here.
Well, back in the day I did. All right. Well, that's it, folks. We don't have time for calls. Tomorrow on the program, who are we going to do, Brendan? Is it going to be Howard Bryant? Is that what we said?
That's what we decided before the show. Yeah.
What's that?
What you want to do? We said that would be a breath of fresh air.
Yes. We're going to play this interview I did with Howard Bryant. He's a sports writer, but he's also a really, he's written a series of essays and brilliant stuff about race. And it actually went quite well with the interview that we had done. I mean, now it's going to seem like years ago, but it was, I had interviewed him just as a pre-tape a day or two after we had spoken to, I can't even remember who it was, who had done an academic study of
Davin
how,
Phoenix.
who was it?
Davin L. Phoenix, I believe.
Wow. I could, in a million years, I would have never remembered that name. It feels like it was an eternity ago. But how African-American voters respond to emotional appeals and anger in the context of voting in the political sphere. And
I've referenced that a few times since then.
Yeah. And you should listen to this interview tomorrow, because he brought it up in a less data-oriented perspective. And it was fascinating. And it would have made more sense to play it shortly after that. But, you know, the situation got away from us. So we'll be back on live on Thursday, but everybody check this out tomorrow. What's going on with the Antifada?
Oh, wow. So this week on the Antifada, we have recorded another episode with Trash Future. Very funny podcast out of the UK, but it's better than the last one because I'm on it this time. We talk about this wacky publication, Spiked, and how it grew from this weird Trotskyist sect to become this basically conservative, libertarian, but also socially conservative magazine with money from the Koch brothers, and whether it's an op or just regular Trotskyism and the way these things develop. Then in our bonus, we go over some of the articles that have been on Spiked, including the one that says Karen is a slur. And it's fun. We had a lot of fun with it.
Know me.
I feel so bad for actual Karens that I'm just Karen. Okay. On this week's The Nomiki Show, there's a whole lot of DNC. I sent out the message, what do you guys want to hear about? And I get the DNC, and this was the week to do so. So my opening is up, and it's a breakdown of sort of the DNC's infrastructure and where, you know, who they're aligned with and why maybe some of these strategies are, spoiler alert, I just think that they don't want to win. We have David Moron, who talks about the firm Perkins Coie, which is sort of, they're facilitating all of the legal entities with the establishment and campaigns. It's a really interesting interview. It just went up this morning. So take a look at that on YouTube and become a patron at patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. And Micah Utrecht is going to be on in a couple of days. So that's going to go up for our next interview. So.
All right, folks. We'll check us out tomorrow. Bye-bye.
I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid.